My name's Brandon and this is Nickelodeon Video Game History, a show where I take a look back on all of the video games based on Nickelodeon shows and retrospectively review them. Fairly OddParents, I have such a weird relationship with this show. I don't know if there's another show that I've sunk as many hours into despite not really enjoying. Something about this show just never clicked with me. Maybe it's because I always found Timmy kind of unlikable. Regardless, I watched a crap load of it because, hey, Big Time Rush is coming up next, might as well sit through this for the next 15 minutes. Fairly OddParents was created by notorious grifter Butch Hartman. He'd built up a solid resume through his work on Dexter's Lab and Johnny Bravo, and in 1997 he was contacted by Fred Siebert, the founder of Frederator Studios and Nick Exec at the time, to pitch ideas for the debuting Oh Yeah cartoon series. Hartman ultimately turned down the offer, but once Johnny Bravo finished, he decided that he wanted to create his own series rather than work on somebody else's. The idea for Fairly OddParents was initially pitched to Cartoon Network, who turned it down, leading to Hartman linking up with Nickelodeon again. After a bunch of well-received shorts, the show was picked up alongside Chalk Zone and My Life as a Teenage Robot. So on March 30, 2001, Fairly OddParents made its debut, premiering right before the premiere of Invader Zim. As we all know, the show was a mega success. It ran for 10 seasons, had 3 live-action made-for-TV movies starring a literal criminal, and earlier this year it was announced that a live-action sequel series was in development for Paramount+. Naturally, a show of this success had plenty of merchandising opportunities. Action figures, clothing, theme park attractions being the title of designer's follow-up flop to Panda, and of course, video games. Fairly OddParents received 6 video games if you count the handheld versions of the console games being unique, but it all started with Enter the Cleft. Released on November 4, 2002, it was exclusive to the Game Boy Advance. To bring the show to life for the very first time, we have Altron in charge, who we're very familiar with. They developed the first game I ever reviewed, Dexter's Lab Robot Rampage, as well as Hey Arnold the movie. They'll go on to make Nicktoons Freeze Frame Frenzy, Tak on the DS, both Danny Phantom games, a bunch of SpongeBob games, and Tak Mojo Mistake, a game I only just learned about. Reviews were decent for Enter the Cleft. It landed on a 6.3 average, which places it squarely in the middle tier of Nickelodeon video games. Last week was a disaster. Hopefully Enter the Cleft can give me some sort of joy. When you'd imagine a Fairly OddParents game, you'd probably dream up a bunch of mechanics around wishes. After all, it's basically what the whole show is about. Well, Enter the Cleft doesn't really go into that too heavily. Instead, the game kind of revolves around a singular wish. Timmy wants to be part of the MCU, just like every other A-list actor these days, so Cosmo and Wanda zap him into a Crimson Chin comic. Quickly fighting your way through bad guys, you encounter Timmy's hero and offer yourself up to be his sidekick.
Who are you supposed to be?
Well, I'm Incrediboy!
Fly home, buddy.
Unlike in The Incredibles, Crimson Chin doesn't completely hate this idea, but quickly the villains hatch a dastardly plot to take him out, and then they escape into the real world. So you're off to save the day, but not before suffering a major case of deja vu. Anybody who's picked up Hey Arnold the movie will immediately recognize a bunch of things that have been straight up reused. This made me extremely worried. The menus and the structure of stages and levels is laid out identically to that previous game. I was thinking we were in for a complete reskin job, but it turned out to be a false alarm. Clearly Altron have said screw it, reuse all of the unimportant stuff, which freed up time to spend on the gameplay. Considering how quickly these games were being turned around in the early 2000s, cutting out the need to design new menus and superfluous aspects would have been like striking gold for a developer. Playing the game for just 30 seconds shows that they haven't remotely reskinned Hey Arnold. Sure, there are some similar elements like the power-up system, but Enter the Cleft is overwhelmingly its own game. I think the style of 2D platformer I'd liken it to is Mega Man. God, I really need to get a new comparison. I'm really out here comparing every 2D platformer to either Mario or Mega Man. But hey, this game is a combat-focused 2D platformer that even includes a kind of boss rush at the end, so the comparison is apt. You'll spend your 2 or so hours here jumping out of harm's way and shooting down enemies. Timmy has some sort of squirt gun as his basic move, which actually takes a lot of enemies out in one hit, even towards the end of the game. As you progress through levels, you'll find temporary power-ups that guarantee a one-hit KO or freeze an enemy in place. The power-ups never radically change the game, and they're all very temporary, but they're a fun change of pace regardless. Probably the most frustrating thing about them is they all have drawbacks, a strange thing to add to power-ups that are supposed to make you feel stronger. For example, the attack that freezes enemies is weaker than your normal attack, requiring more hits to take out an enemy. Then your one-hit KO move has an insanely short reach. The basic weapon's reach is bothersome a lot of the time, so shortening that even further is annoying and really hurts the flow of the game. And what's up with so many enemies in this game being regular ass animals? It's not that big of a deal, but it is bizarre that I'm killing so many birds in a superhero game. Why am I not just killing henchmen?
Everybody hates birds, right?
As you wander through levels, it's hard to miss the hundreds of wands scattered around for you to pick up. On the surface, this seems like the typical collect 100 and you get a 1-up system, and it is, but it's also more than that. The wands double as currency too. Throughout levels you'll run into Cosmo and Wanda, who are running an item shop. Here you can purchase a couple of weapons, some items that will assist with platforming, as well as health and extra lives. It's a neat little system, but like the attack power-ups, they all have limited use before you're forced to purchase them again. And overall, it feels like the system wasn't completely thought out. As I said, collecting 100 gives you a 1-up. When you do this, your wand counter goes back to 0, which genuinely feels like a penalty sometimes. It's even more bizarre because the 1-up you can purchase in the shop costs 80 wands. Everything about this system feels slightly off. I get what Ultron was going for, but it definitely needed tweaking for it to hit the mark. Another area where Enter the Cleft differentiates itself from Hey Arnold is the structure of its levels. Hey Arnold featured a lot of levels that were sprawling, but here levels are far more linear. Sure, there's plenty of secret doors that lead to a 1-up or something, but it's genuinely just one small room rather than what felt like a million different paths at times in Hey Arnold. It's got plenty of stock standard 2D platformer stage themes like time travel, but the one I liked the most was the levels set inside the comic book. These levels are laid out like a comic, which I really like the aesthetic of. It's similar to the manga level of Hi Hi Puffy Amiyumi, Genie and the Amp, except that game was a steaming pile of shit. Unfortunately, Enter the Cleft's gameplay has its stumbles, some of which are quite major. Something the game really likes to do is trick you into falling to your death, and I don't think it's designed that way on purpose. Because of the way the camera follows you, you'll find yourself walking down a slope and then bam, you've fallen off a cliff face. The same thing applies to climbing down ladders at times. It's never fun to cop a death this way. Additionally, Enter the Cleft's platforming controls are not designed for precision, and hell, Ultron seems to know that. While it takes inspiration from Mega Man with the combat focus, platforming rarely amounts to more than, hey kid, go jump over this minor inconvenience. Later in the game, they have some more twitchy and quick reaction time sections, but rarely do they ever ask you to make precise jumps over bottomless pits. But when they do force you into that style of gameplay, the limitations of the movement definitely stand out. I think restraint is a pretty big theme of Enter the Cleft. Ultron held back from crazy platforming and tailored the gameplay to its controls, and the same applies to the way they change up the gameplay. In Hey Arnold, pretty much every level in a new stage was a new type of gameplay, which left me lamenting that we didn't get a version of that game that wasn't just a pure A to B platformer. Here you get those spicy gameplay change-ups, but they're just that, change-ups. You'll get a maze level, which absolutely sucks, a find all the items level, which Hey Arnold was obsessed with, and even a shmup stage. These all vary in quality, but they all share a single thing in common: they only appear once. Take the shmup for example. It is actually a bit of a difficulty spike because the game gives you 0 health items during it. If this was a recurring thing, it would get old quickly, but in its one-off appearance, it's actually quite easy to stomach. Speaking of difficulty, Enter the Cleft has a really nice sense of escalating difficulty. It never becomes truly challenging, but you can feel levels getting progressively harder, to the point where the final levels definitely had me scooting a little closer to the edge of my seat. It's a little off for the boss battles though. Do I even need to bring up boss battles anymore? It's basically safe to assume that they've been stuffed into every Nickelodeon game as an out-of-place afterthought. The boss battles did have potential here. They're very Mega Man-esque in their design, but they're all pretty broken. The megaphone weapon melts all of them in an instant, and the final boss battle can be beaten in your sleep just by standing against the wall. It's not all bad though. The boss battles did give us this moment of a robot Vicky trying to crush Timmy with her giant dump truck ass.
Smack my ass like a drum.
I feel like I should make a quick note of the game's writing, which there's a surprising amount of. While it's not Jimmy Negatron levels of nonsensical gibberish, Altron, who are based in Japan, have clearly had a bit of a rough go with the translation. Again, it's nothing insane, but a lot of the dialogue is very clunky and seems pretty out of character. Maybe we can chalk it down to Fairly OddParents being a very fresh show when this game was being developed. The final thing I want to touch on is the music. Altron knocked it out of the park and into the damn stratosphere. The level themes are all really solid, but it's the pause theme and the stage select themes that sent me into orbit. They just have this weirdly calming and peaceful vibe that I really dig. The strange thing is, these tracks really don't fit the overall theme and vibe of the game, but I don't care, they're just that damn good. I'm not exaggerating when I say these are some of my favourite video game songs ever. Enter the Cleft is worth checking out for the soundtrack alone. I was pleasantly surprised by Enter the Cleft. I think I've been conditioned to expect the worst from licensed handheld platformers, and then the fact that this game seems like a reskin of Hey Arnold the movie when you boot it up really doesn't help. What we have here is a basic but respectable action platformer. There aren't really any new or revolutionary ideas here, but they've executed well while playing it safe. In all honesty, I'd say this game is in the top echelon of Nick games so far. Tighten up a few areas and you'd have a genuinely great game here. I really hope this is only the beginning for Fairly OddParents games. I've seen a lot of franchises start really well with their debut game and then fade fast, so hopefully it just builds from here. Next time I'll be looking at Rugrats I Gotta Go Party on the GBA, the first of 2 Rugrats games released in 2002. Like the entirety of Nickelodeon Video Game History, the Rugrats has had an up and down run of things. There's been great games, awful games, and everything in between. Hopefully for my sanity, this game falls closer to the great end of the spectrum. To make sure you catch that review and the impending Nickelodeon All-Stars Brawl review, hit the subscribe button.